Thank you all for coming. As most of you already know, I am Officer Peach, the Public Information Officer for the Baltimore County Police Department. We are going to start this by introducing our speakers. Chief Hyatt will be the first person to give a statement. That will be followed by Colonel Rob McCullough from the Criminal Operations Bureau. And then we have Robin Coffin, the Deputy State's Attorney, also with us to make a couple of statements. After she finishes, like I said before, I will read the 911 transcripts to you so that the caller can remain anonymous. Then we will play the video that we have for you to watch for the body-worn camera video. After that, we will stop it, and Colonel McCullough will then walk you through a couple of slowed down segments that we made for you to kind of point some things out to you. And with that, I will turn it over to Chief Hyatt.
Good morning. Everything about this incident was difficult for everyone involved. We are going to continue to work to be a transparent and accountable organization for the communities that we serve. As difficult as this video is to watch, it shows our officer in the right place and working to keep the community safe. The loss of a life is a devastating and tragic occurrence, and the pain of this incident is felt by everyone who was involved. In accordance with our body-worn video release policy, we are releasing the video today in its full format, as well as providing some details to allow everyone to view the video in context. I'm going to turn it over at this time to Colonel Robert McCullough, the commanding officer of our Criminal Investigations Bureau.
Good morning. I'm Colonel Robert McCullough, Chief of the Criminal Investigations Bureau for the Baltimore County Police Department. We are here to provide you with information about a police-involved shooting that occurred on May the 16th, 2020 in the Essex precinct. We will be providing you with relevant video footage and other information in this case so that you can have a better understanding about what happened on that evening. It's important to remember that this incident is still under investigation and additional facts may come to light at a later time. This release of the BWC video is in keeping with our department's policy of releasing the BWC for this type of incident within 30 business days, as previously stated by Chief Hyatt. I would like to first lay out the details of that evening for you, and then we will take a look at the video. On May the 16th, 2020 at 10:42 p.m., Officer Knight, ID number 4062 of the Baltimore County Police Department, was dispatched to the unit block of Skipjack Court in Essex for a nuisance call. The anonymous caller advised that there was a crowd outside and the young men were drinking. He then observed the suspect vehicle, a green Buick Park Avenue, being driven erratically by a subject who would later be identified as Robert Johnson, Jr. Officer Knight then requested additional backup units to respond to the location. Once the vehicle parked, Officer Knight exited his marked police vehicle in an effort to make contact with the driver of the car. It was at this point that the driver exited the vehicle, dropping what appeared to be a handgun on the ground. The suspect, Robert Johnson, then immediately went to retrieve the weapon and picked up the weapon off the ground. Commands given by Officer Knight were ignored, and the officer subsequently discharged his weapon. A foot pursuit ensued, and the suspect ran off with the handgun towards the other townhomes on the court. It is at this point that Officer Knight discharges his weapon, again striking suspect Johnson. Medics were immediately requested. Once the scene was secured, Officer Knight and the backup officers rendered aid to Mr. Johnson, and he was transported to Shock Trauma Hospital where he succumbed to his injuries. There was a second subject struck by the officer's gunshots. He received an apparent gunshot wound to his leg. He was transported to Johns Hopkins Hospital where he was treated and released. The Homicide Unit and the Internal Affairs Division responded and conducted their investigations. The Baltimore County State's Attorney's Office has issued a declination letter in this case, and Officer Knight is currently back working at his assigned duties, working patrol in Essex. At this time, we'll ask Officer Peach to come over and read the transcript for you for the 911 call, and then we will jump into the video.
Actually, Robin, do you want to make your statement first? That might make a little bit more sense.
Good morning. I'm Robin Coffin, Deputy State's Attorney for Baltimore County. I want to echo the chief's sentiments. It's always terrible for the community when there's a loss of life at the hands of the police. I want to shout the sentiment, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and all lives matter. The State's Attorney's Office received this case for investigation. It was to determine if criminal charges should be filed against Officer Knight for this shooting. Having reviewed all of the statements by eyewitnesses in that community, the body-worn cameras, and all the recorded statements, it was the State's Attorney's Office position that this is a justified shooting. Oh, pardon me. When Mr. Johnson reached for that handgun, he immediately put Officer Knight's life at risk. When he continued to hold on to that handgun and run with it in that community that was very busy out there. There were 30 or more people outside, doors were open, and he was running towards that area that was blocked off and holding on to that gun. He presented a grave risk to that community. And as you'll see in the body-worn camera, he continued to maintain control of that gun and then pointed it again at Officer Knight when the subsequent shots were fired. It's a tragedy for everyone, but no criminal charges will be filed.
Okay. And with that, I will read the transcripts for you so that the 911 caller can remain anonymous. 911. Baltimore County 911, what is the address of your emergency? Caller. I live at Skipjack Court, and it's a crowd of young guys outside. They're drinking, they're all over the top of people's cars. They're approaching all the neighbors, and in the house you feel threatened because they're walking up on you, and we need some type of police presence around here to clear this neighborhood up. 911. Okay, repeat your address so I can get help started for you. Caller. I can't hear you. 911. Repeat your address for me so I can send an officer out there. Caller. Yes, it's Skipjack Court. 911. Okay, and you said Skipjack Court? Yes. And that's near Seagate Court? Yes. That's the main court at Cove Village coming down all the way to the end. 911. And that's in Essex, correct? Caller. Yes, ma'am. 911. You said they're in the parking lot? Caller. They're in the parking lot. They're commotioning all over people's cars. It's just chaotic. It's a lot. They just need to come clear this presence up because the neighbors that's coming home, you can't even get into your house. There are groups of people outside. 911. I'll let the officers know. What's your phone number in case we get disconnected? Caller. I want to remain anonymous. I do not want police to come to my house. 911. Okay, I'll let the officers know you want to be anonymous. Just stay on the line. I want to ask you a couple of questions, okay? Caller, 911. All right, I sent a call for dispatch. These questions aren't delaying help, they're just helping them on their way. If you don't know the answer, it's okay to say unknown. Were weapons involved or mentioned? Caller, no. 911. And are you talking about a group of young guys? Like, how many people are involved? Caller, it's just a lot of kids. It's probably about a good 20 or 30 of them. Like, they had a cookout. They had a party, they were drinking. It's just very chaotic. Like, even like coming into, it's just a lot of people. The police come into the court, they'll see for themselves what's really going on. 911. All right, I'm letting them know that. Stay on the line with me. Caller, thank you. 911. And how did they arrive? Caller, they were in their cars. There's lots of cars outside. I don't know. 911. Do you know what color the vehicles are that came in? Caller, I think it's like a brown car, like an older kind of model car. 911. Is that a 4-door, 2-door SUV? Caller, I think it's a 4-door. 911. All right, lock your doors and windows and do not disturb anything at the scene. An officer will be dispatched as soon as possible. Do you know if anyone on scene has a fever or a cough? Caller, no, it's a lot of people out there. I don't know what's going on. I just want to remain anonymous. 911. You're anonymous. I'll let them know you want to be anonymous. Caller. Years, and I don't think that this is, I pay money every month, and this is very inappropriate. 911. I understand. I'll let you are anonymous, so they won't, there's nothing comes back to you, and just call us back if anything changes or leave further information if they do leave, okay? Caller, thank you, I appreciate you. 911, you're welcome. Caller, all right, stay safe. 911, all right, you too, bye-bye. And now I will turn it over to Colonel McCullough to give you some information as we play the video.
First of all, a word of caution to all viewers. The images and information you're about to see may be disturbing. When a police officer uses force, it can be graphic and difficult to watch. In addition, we must be cognizant of the fact that we are watching someone who has just lost their life. The sanctity of life is important to the men and women of the Baltimore County Police Department. Let's take a look at the body-worn camera video first.
Jason, Skipjack Court, near Seagate Court in the dead end. Complaint says in the parking lot there's a crowd of young guys drinking all over the vehicles outside, following residences up to their house. 20 to 30 subjects involved. Do you want a second unit?
11, 12, I'm directing negative.
10, 4, 22, 42.
11, 12, no emergency. Will you just send someone else this way, please?
Unit direct 11, 12 on Skipjack Court.
11, I'm right here. Hold on a little bit.
10, 4, it's going to be Skipjack Court.
12, shots fired. Tiny fast now.
Unit Skipjack Court, special unit, shots fired on Skipjack Court. 11, 12, checking on you. Special units responding to Skipjack Court.
Don't move! 11, 12. I have one person shot. I need a medic. I have one occupant inside a car. He's not secure.
10, 4, 26.
No emergency, but would you send someone else this way, please? Hey, that's 3 cars, dude. You want to stop?
Unit direct 11, 12. 11, I'm right here. 10, 10, Mark.
You got your license, bud? Oh, no, don't! 11-12, shots fired. Stop! On the ground, on the ground! Don't move! Hands! Hands! Let me see your hands! Hands! Don't move! Put your hands out to the side! Put them to the side! Do not move! Do not move! Don't move! 11-12. I have one person shot. I need a medic. I have one occupant inside a car. He's not secure.
Now we'll show you a part of the video, and it'll be slowed down, and I'll point out a few things to you. So when Officer Knight pulls into the court, we know that the suspect vehicle has already been driving erratically in that court. And you see him backing in and out of parking space in front of Officer Knight. We know to this point that the person had hit 3 vehicles. There you see the gun. When he's exiting the vehicle, Mr. Johnson exits the vehicle, and the gun strikes the ground. Of course, in addition to seeing it, Officer Knight hears the sound of that gun hitting the ground, so he immediately detects a threat there. Next, we're at the top of the court. You see the gun in Mr. Johnson's right hand. And this is after numerous times that Officer Knight commanded him to stop and to not pick up that weapon and to drop that weapon. And lastly, you see a picture of the Remington .45 caliber handgun there. In addition to recovering that handgun, we also recovered a bag that was in the possession of Mr. Johnson, and in that bag contained a distribution amount of marijuana also.
And at this point, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you may have.
Can you restore the picture of the gun on the ground? It was up so briefly. Oh, can I keep it down for a second? Yes, sir. Thank you.
How many shots did the officer fire, and did the suspect return any fire?
The officer fired 8 shots. There were 3 fired initially when you saw the gun had been dropped and picked up, and there were additional 5 fired at the top of the court.
Hey, Rob, I heard the Deputy State's Attorney mention that at some point Johnson points the gun while he's running at the officer. Did you capture that or slow that down where we could see that? I didn't. I couldn't make that out just because things were so chaotic and fast.
We will release the video to you. I'm not sure we're going to release the slowed down version to them also, right?
Do you have the thumb drive of those shots of the arm reaching back?
Do you want me to put that back up?
Yeah, because the shot that you showed actually is the beginning of it. It shows the weapon coming up, and then you actually see it going and pointing. So I think this will be helpful.
Thank you.
No, the next frames. There are multiple frames.
So you want me to play the
Yes.
video part?
Shots fired.
Can you slow it down and do frame by frame with this? No?
No.
We do have the ability to provide that, so we'll make sure that when we push out the information later, we do have that and we will provide that.
But that in and of itself does not constitute the threat. The fact he picked up the gun and it's a crowded area, that, if I heard you correctly, makes them a threat to the officer's safety and everyone else's just by having the gun, knowing he has it and running.
So I certainly don't want to speak for our Deputy State's Attorney. If she'd like to comment on when she evaluated the situation, I can speak further on our end.
And I wish that we had those stills, because yes, pointing the gun back at the officer shows him to be a continuous threat to the officer. He's maintaining control of that weapon, and he is making a decided decision to point it at the officer.
And that was before the officer fired even the first shot.
No.
Oh, it was after the first series?
The first 3 shots are when Mr. Johnson reaches down for the gun. None of those shots connected. The next shots are as he's running in towards, and it's an L at Skipjack. As he's running in that direction, he starts firing. The shots continue. You see the backward motion of his hand with the handgun, and he actually maintains control of that handgun until he is on the ground. There's injuries to his finger, indicating that his finger was on the trigger guard as he went down. Again, as long as he is in possession of that gun, he is a grave threat to the officer and the community.
And the bullet that struck Johnson, if it was one, was that in the back or the side, or where did it strike him?
In the upper back and twice in the buttocks. And someone also asked, no, Johnson did not just fire his weapon.
When was the second man injured? Shot in the leg?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
So the question was about the second individual that received a strike to his leg. So in reference to Mr. Jackson, who was struck in the leg, to begin with, anytime we have a situation like this where an innocent individual during a critical incident is injured, that is, of course, incredibly concerning for all of us. At the time that this incident occurred, this officer made split-second decisions during that time. And we certainly, as part of our internal investigation, our administrative investigation, will continue to review portions of the rest of the incident. But again, this officer, when we have a critical incident like this, it is difficult for everyone that's involved. Certainly difficult for the family, difficult for the community, difficult for our innocent individual who was struck, and difficult for the officer as well. During the course of the shots that were fired, while Mr. Johnson was in motion is when that round went through that door.
He was inside one of the apartments.
He was inside of one of the dwellings, that's correct.
So there were 8 shots and 3 hit Mr. Johnson?
That is correct.
And the veteran officer had never been involved in a police involved shooting before in 24 years?
That's correct. The police officer that was involved with 24 years on the agency had never been involved in a police-involved shooting. This was his first.
Is there anything you can tell us about the suspect? Was he involved in criminal activity, found marijuana, he had a gun, was it a legal gun?
I'm going to, yes, the gun, it was a legitimate firearm that was recovered. In terms of his criminal background, I'm going to turn it over to our Deputy State's Attorney, Ms. Coffin.
Did he legally own that gun?
No.
Not only could he not legally own the gun, he would have been a prohibited person. He had just been released from federal prison on April 1st, 2020 for a weapons charge. So at this time, he is on parole and probation and prohibited from owning and possessing a firearm. Now, obviously, the officer did not know that at the time, but it certainly explains why Mr. Johnson was so adamant not to be caught and his conduct. He has a lengthy criminal history. It is for crimes of violence, the handgun, 2 handgun possessions, CDS in a correctional institution, armed robbery, and carjacking. But again, the officer didn't know that at the time of the shooting.
And Dave, I can add that the gun was actually stolen.
Can you come back to them?
I'm sorry, I apologize. I would like to add that the handgun had actually been stolen in Virginia, so that it was traced back to Virginia.
Okay, any other questions?
Maybe the chief could just talk about from a policing perspective, the decision-making that the officer made. I know it's split second, we can see how fast it is, but talk about the training, since it is a justified use of force, that decision-making and what we watched.
Certainly. Certainly, any type of critical incident that occurs, our officers are in a position that they have to make split-second decisions very quickly, very rapidly. Our officers are trained through a use of force continuum, and they do receive training both in the academy, and they receive annual training in reference to our use of force policies, which are, by the way, publicly accessible. We also have several other models that we utilize for critical decision-making. And with our critical decision-making model, which is something else that we also train, and that's something that the department has been utilizing for many years, there is a clause in that critical decision-making model regarding sanctity of life. So although we just recently added a clause to our policy on sanctity of life, it's something that the Baltimore County Police Department has taken very seriously for many, many years.
Okay, and at this time that will conclude the press conference. Thank you, everybody, for coming out today.